Hello and welcome to our Scholarship and Financial Aid Night for Wesley Chapel High School. I'm Mrs. Faysash and I'm the College and Career Specialist. The way that we're going to organize tonight's presentation is I'll start talking about Bright Futures and other scholarships, and then the second part of the presentation will focus on FAFSA and financial aid. Thanks so much for joining us, and I hope that you learn a lot in this presentation. I wanted to start our presentation tonight by giving a big shout out to the class of 21. They earned over $4 million in post-secondary funding from Bright Futures, athletic, merit, and private scholarship sources. I hope this motivates you to work on your scholarships this year. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Bright Futures. Students must enroll in an eligible Florida public or private post-secondary educational institution in order to use Bright Futures funding. Students may use the awards for classes during the fall, spring, and even summer semesters. A maximum 45 credit hours will be funded each year between those 3 semesters. This is not a competition. This really is the best scholarship you can work towards, because if you meet the requirements, you will receive the award, and it is a 4-year award. Students will receive funding for up to 120 hours for their academic and medallion levels of Bright Futures. This will fund a bachelor's degree. If their bachelor's degree is earned in 7 semesters or less, students can use Bright Futures for the first semester of their master's program. Students have up to 5 years after graduation to completely use their funding. And students can also use Bright Futures for the 2+2 program at 2 different schools. So if a student chooses to go to a state or community college for their first 2 years, it will fund at that school, and then when they transfer to a state university, it will continue to fund at the university level. The highest level of Bright Futures is the Florida Academic Scholars level. In order to receive this level, students need to have a 3.5 weighted GPA in their core classes by the end of senior year, and this will encompass all of their grades 9th through 12th. They also will need test scores of a 1330 SAT or a 29 ACT. They will need these by June of 2022. They'll need 100 community service hours by the time they graduate, and this will pay for 100% of their tuition and fees at a Florida public university or college. They can also use this at a private university, but they will only receive the amount of funding they would have received at that Florida public university. This is also renewable for 4 years. Students must keep a 3.0 GPA in their college level courses. The second level of Bright Futures is the Florida Medallion level. For this, students need a 3.0 weighted GPA in their core classes, either a 1210 SAT or a 25 ACT score, 75 community service hours by graduation. This level will pay for 75% of tuition and fees at a Florida public university or college. New this year is that if students decide to start at a Florida community college or a Florida state college like PHSC or HCC, Bright Futures will actually pay for 100% of the funding for tuition and fees for the time that they are at that state or community college. So basically, if they went to PHSC, the first 2 years, it would be paid at 100% level. And then the second 2 years, when they go to their Florida university, it will go back down to that 75% level. So this is a really big perk this year. This is also renewable for 4 years. Students need to keep a 2.75 college GPA. Our last level is the Gold Seal, and this is going to be only for very specific students. So students will need a 3.0 weighted GPA in their non-elective courses, so that's those core courses. They also will need a 3.5 unweighted GPA in their vocational courses. So in order to qualify for this program, students will need to complete 3 credits in the same vocational program. At our school, that would be the business classes, the ag classes, the auto classes, and also TV production. They will need qualifying scores on an SAT, ACT, or a PERT. They're much lower than the other 2 levels of Bright Futures. They will need 30 community service hours, and so this level cannot be used at a university. This would only be used at a state or community college or a vocational tech program. It's basically going to pay for half of their degree there. They can also use this to work on an Associate of Science degree if they decide to go to PHSC or HCC or another school like that that offers the 2-year Associate of Science degrees, and there's actually several of those. So if your student is in vocational courses and has been for 3 years with a high GPA in those courses, I would recommend that they come and chat with me so I can go over some options with them. The Florida Financial Aid application, also referred to as FFAA, is needed to provide funding for Bright Futures and several other scholarships and grants. The FFAA application opens October 1st of a student's senior year, and they have until the next August 31st of their high school graduation year to complete this. I would suggest going ahead and completing this soon, as you do not need to meet the requirements of Bright Futures to have an application on file. This one application is used for multiple programs, not just the Florida Bright Futures Scholarship. Other FFAA program awards include the Benequesto National Merit Scholarship, the First Generation Matching Grant. That will be awarded by the school's financial aid department, but the funds come from the state. And this is for students who do not have a parent that has a bachelor's degree. So neither parent can have a bachelor's degree in order to be considered for this. The Jose Marti Scholarship for Hispanic students, Bethune-Cookman Minority Education Program, and then the final one is a scholarship for children and spouses of deceased or 100% disabled veterans. So if you qualify for that status, you would definitely want to fill out the FFAA in order to receive that funding. Prepaid can be used with all scholarships and financial aid, so that's great if your student already has a prepaid plan. If you are using prepaid in Bright Futures, basically they will usually use prepaid first, and then the Bright Futures money will just be deposited into your checking account with any remaining balance that hasn't been used. Check with each institution of whether they take the prepaid out first or the Florida Bright Futures out first, but just know that you will be getting a refund with any overpayment from those. So for most public universities, and honestly most private universities as well, admitted students are automatically considered for merit aid based on just their GPA and test score, so it's really just those hard numbers that they will look at. And there's usually several levels of merit scholarships at the universities. So some schools will go ahead and publish a matrix to show exactly what you need for each level. USF and FGCU and I believe FAU all publish their levels of what aid you will get with each test score and GPA. Some schools don't, because they basically will look at the applicants that are being admitted and then do it based on those averages. But you will be informed if you qualify for one of those scholarships, so that's really nice. Those are all renewable for 4 years. Some of them do have specific criteria for renewal. Yearly FAFSA application is usually required for these university merit awards. They just need it on file. It doesn't matter if you qualify for financial aid. It's just something that has to be on file for them to give you those merit funds. Students graduating in the top 10% of their senior class will receive a scholarship from PHSC. They'll need to have met that 10% by February of their senior year. The award will pay $2,600 per year for 2 years at PHSC. Students must enroll in 15 credit hours per fall and spring semester, and in order to have renewal, they'll need a 3.0 GPA in their college level courses, and they will have to apply each year for that renewal. Aside from Bright Futures, private scholarships are also great outside of the university. So these would be scholarships you would apply to specifically with an application for just that scholarship. Corporations and nonprofits and other institutions will usually offer these. These are competitive and usually require fairly extensive applications, especially if they're at the national level. So these can be local, state, or national scholarships. There's basically going to be something that falls into each of those categories, and you'll just have to decide which ones you would like to apply for. I do a monthly newsletter for scholarships, and I would use that as a starting point in your scholarship search. You can, of course, always go to FastWeb and different options like that, but I just would say be careful with the type of information you're giving out and make sure it looks like a legitimate scholarship. So the thing with scholarships is they really are not awarded until late spring. So a lot of times we can't totally rely on these for our funding for school, because for the most part, you're not going to find out until April or May whether you're a recipient of these scholarships. Typically, these will be paid to the college in your name, so the money won't be coming directly to you. It will go to the school, and similar to if you had the prepaid and the Bright Futures, any refund would go to your bank account after they pay your school fees. There are different types of scholarships. Some are merit-based, like we've spoken about with the universities, and some are going to be very much need-based, and that will be based on your family income situation. So just understand that if it is a need-based scholarship, for the most part, you will be asked to provide copies of your tax returns. I know some people will see that and get a little hesitant to apply for the scholarships. Let me know which ones you're applying for, but I would say if they're any of the local ones or any of the ones that I put in my newsletter, feel confident that that's just a normal requirement. They, of course, have to prove that the student has the need when they're looking at a need-based scholarship. For merit scholarships, it's not considered from family income. It would be more from your GPA, your test scores, your volunteer work, and your extracurricular activities, as well as if there's an essay involved. This is really just going to be based on your accomplishments compared to your peers' accomplishments. These are some different ways that you can think about narrowing your scholarship search. So ethnicity, hobbies, your health and educational plans, if you have any of those at school, the major that you're looking into, your location, and also your family members' employment. A lot of companies have scholarships for dependents of their employees, so definitely look into those as well. Here's a few other scholarship search sites if you are looking to expand your search beyond my newsletters. I would say try the newsletters first, and then if there's any extra time, you can always go to these and start looking for some more scholarships. I just wanted to make you aware of a few local scholarships that I would highly recommend. The Sean Bartel Scholarship, the Withlacoochee Electric Scholarship, which will begin in December, and you do have to have Withlacoochee Electric as your electric provider. This is a 4-year scholarship. It's usually about $2,700 a year. The Pasco Education Foundation Scholarship. This is kind of a local scholarship database. Basically, you will submit one application, and it will be used to identify 50 to 100 different scholarships that the student may qualify for. After you fill the application out, it will narrow it down and show you which scholarships the student is qualified for, and at that point they may need to write an essay for those. This also opens December 1st. If you are attending PHSC, the PHSC Foundation Scholarship is a really awesome resource. They have so many scholarships, also similar to that Pasco Education Foundation Scholarship, where students will fill out one application, but it will be applied to several different scholarships. There's so many scholarship sites, it's hard to sometimes know which ones we should apply for and which ones we should steer clear of. So I just want to give you a couple of tips when considering applying for a scholarship. If it's one of the scholarships that I have in my newsletter, you can feel safe applying for those. When you're looking at the sites, you want to make sure that you're not applying for scholarships that don't require an extensive application. If it's just simple basic information, then it's probably more of a scholarship based on a sweepstakes system, and a lot of times they're using that to get your information for phone calls and mail. So just kind of keep that in mind. Anything that costs money to enter, you would definitely not want to participate in. Scholarships should be free to enter, and those are the ones we'd want to focus on. Sometimes you'll see scholarships that require a phone call or visit with a business before or after you can apply. Again, those are something to consider. It's not that the scholarship is not credible, because it probably is something that's being given out, but they are also using this to generate leads. So just something to keep in mind there. With scholarship recommendations, many of the scholarships will ask for 1 to 3 recommendations from people that could write about your student, and I just would basically recommend asking well in advance of the deadline to give teachers an opportunity to have time to write that. Give your recommender information to use in the recommendation, and if you need a sheet for that, come and see me. I can give you a simple sheet that you can fill out, and basically that's just going to help them include things in that recommendation so it's more specific. Make sure you're tailoring the recommendation to the scholarship. This one would be for scholarships that maybe are very specific to a major that you're going into, something like that. I would ask different teachers and sponsors, ask for a locked PDF, and usually you can upload that. They're also able to send it to me if they don't want to give it to the student, and I can help you get that and put it into a sealed envelope. You can also scan a hard copy, and that way you can use a PDF for later. A lot of times teachers are really only willing to give you one, and that's totally fine. They can just make it to whom it may concern and just make it general and just reference scholarship instead of a specific scholarship, and then you can use that for all of the different scholarships that you apply for. If you're watching this before senior year, well, congratulations because you're way ahead of the game, so I'm excited for you. So, there are some things that you can work on now in order to be successful with scholarships next year. Most scholarships are going to be for seniors, so just keep that in mind if you are looking at some of those sites. Number one is I would go ahead and create a resume that you can continue to update through high school. This is going to be great for many purposes, including giving them to people to write recommendations for you. Some scholarships will require that resume, and also this is going to get things in order for your college applications. Make sure that you have a strong connection with some teachers and staff that you might be using for future recommendations. You should probably start thinking about that now. Senior teachers you can use, but a lot of times when you're asking them to write your recommendation, they don't know you that well yet. So try to think of junior teachers that you might be able to establish that rapport with. Become a strong future applicant. So think about grades, test scores, leadership, community service. Those are things that you really need to have established before senior year. We're going to start applying for things in the fall of our senior year, and it's a little bit late to think about it at that point. So try to have that ready to roll for next year. Start to think about a personal statement or essay that you can think about that's only unique to you. And this is something you might use for college applications and scholarships. What's great is that a lot of these can be tailored to different programs, different scholarships, and different applications. So writing one awesome essay can end up being used several times with just a few tweaks. Because we are trying to finish our university applications by November 1st, at the end of October every year we have College Application Week. This is where students can work in my office all week to finish college applications, work on FAFSA, work on FFAA applications, complete their essays, and work on their SAR transcripts. They can use the slide on the next page in order to make an appointment with me. This is something that I would definitely recommend if you are still trying to complete any of the university applications. This year, the event will be October 19th through the 22nd. We do ask that students wear college gear to kick off the week on Tuesday, October 19th. Watch social media for informational webinars as well that can be watched at home for FAFSA and other great programs. Please go ahead and scan this code if you would like to make an appointment for College Application Week this year. You can definitely schedule more than one appointment depending on how much you still have to get done on your college applications. There are a lot of different monies that you can receive from federal, state, and institutional aid and private resources. So I just wanted to go over a few of those and what those would look like if you get awarded these. A public two-year college like HCC or PHSC is going to be about $3,500 a year for tuition and fees in state. A public four-year university or college, again in state for tuition and fees, is going to be around $7,000 to $7,500 per year. And of course, this will be based on your credit hours. If I'm looking to go out of state, tuition alone for a four-year public university out of state would be about $25,000, and a private four-year college, and again, that's not going to really matter in state or out of state since it's private, will be between, I would say, $25,000 and it could even go up to $40,000 for their tuition. For student financial aid, we're mostly going to focus on the FAFSA. You'll find the application at fafsa.gov. It is important that you put .gov and not .com, as you might find yourself at a business website that asks you to pay to submit this application. The federal government is the largest source of student aid, so we definitely want to complete this application to see if we qualify. This will be based on family need and will be based on your taxes that you have to import into the application. We're going to be looking at the 22-23 FAFSA, which opened October 1st. This will cover funding for the fall of 22, the spring of 23, and summer of 23 at the college of your student's choice. In order to do this, we will be looking at our 2020 taxes, and there will be an IRS data retrieval tool so that you can link those electronically to the FAFSA form. This form does have to be completed annually in order to be evaluated for financial aid, as we know sometimes family situations change throughout the year based on jobs, this year based on COVID and other things. So they will look at your most recent sources of funding for your family's aid. You will need several documents in order to complete the FAFSA, so sometimes it's good to go ahead and gather those before completing your application. In order to get started, have your Social Security number or alien registration number on hand. You will also need taxes from actually 2 years prior. So in this case, you'll need taxes from 2020. You also can import those using the IRS data retrieval tool if you would prefer not to use a paper copy of your taxes. You will need to create a separate FSA ID and FSA password for the student and one parent. The student and the parent will need the separate emails for their FSA ID and FSA password in order to electronically sign their FAFSA application. You can also look up school codes for up to 10 institutions for the FAFSA. You can also search by name, so if you don't want to go ahead and do that step, don't worry about it. You'll be able to search by the name or also by the state and city. One thing that a lot of people don't know about FAFSA is that most students will be considered dependent by the Department of Education until they are 24 years old. So a lot of times students think, okay, I can just put in my own taxes and, I obviously don't make that much because I just have a part-time job and that way I'll receive this funding. But even if your parents do not plan to help you pay for school, you still will have to use their information because you are dependent under them. So parent and student information will need to be reported on the FAFSA. And if you go to fafsa.gov, you can find more information about this. There are exceptions to this rule if a student was in foster care, is homeless, was in the military, is married. So you'll have to look at fafsa.gov in order to see if any of those apply to you. But for the vast, vast majority of students, you'll be considered dependent. Another place of confusion could be who is a parent. So just remember that a legal parent is going to be a biological or adoptive parent or a person that the state has determined to be your parent. So just remember that needs to be something that is formal and legal. Grandparents, even if you're living with them, foster parents, legal guardians, and brothers and sisters are not going to be considered parents unless they have legally adopted you. So this is very important in the parent section of FAFSA that you make sure that you're only putting in a biological or legal adoptive parent. The government has made an app for FAFSA, which is great. So you can look up the My Student Aid app on any of your phones and try to go ahead and download that. And it just makes it a little bit easier if you want to be able to process that at any time and be able to update that at any time. When you go to FAFSA.gov, you are going to be looking at this screen. And obviously you're going to be new to the FAFSA process, so you'll go ahead and click Start Here. And then you'll see the screen for the student and the parent. So remember that a student and parent are both going to have to do this. I usually just say go ahead and start with the student or start with the parent. Just choose one, go through it as far as you can, and then at the end you can go back and do the other. For the most part, for my purposes, I'm going to be working with students, so we go ahead and do the student application first. When you do the student application, whenever it says you or your, just remember that they are referencing the student. And so for this section, students will be able to do the student demographic, the school selection, which we talked about, and I'll talk about a little bit more on the next slide, their dependency status. And then once they get to the parent demographics, that's where they're definitely going to need a parent with them in order to answer those questions. So you actually can do everything on the student's application. When you see the Sign and Submit tab at the top, that's where you are going to have to put in the parent's FSA ID as well. So the parent can just make that ID and password, and then this is where they will sign and submit that. Both the student and the parent will have to submit their FSA IDs on that final page in order to process the FAFSA. This is the school selection section, and like we talked about earlier, you can put 10 schools here. So you would want to put all the schools you plan to apply to on here. What some people don't realize is that you actually are not going to get a financial aid package from the schools until you are accepted from the schools. So you don't have to confirm attendance, but you do have to be accepted. So if I were to send this, put USF here, I'm not going to get a financial aid package from them until I actually am accepted to the university, and that'll be like that for all of the other schools. If you are going to PHSC, one thing to note is that you actually will not get your financial aid package until late June or early July, because they do have to see that you have graduated from high school in order to formally accept you into the school and process your financial aid. So just keep that in mind too. So if you know the school code, you can obviously use those, but most people would just look up the schools and universities by the state and the school name, and then you'll click submit. Just make sure that you put all of those on there, any place that you plan to apply, so they can process your aid. Once you submit your application, you will see a student aid report, also called the SAR. This is going to just show basic information about your federal student aid eligibility. So in this section at the top, it will tell you if you qualify for a Pell Grant or not. It also will tell you if you're going to qualify for those subsidized and unsubsidized student loans. You'll also receive a confirmation via email as well. You can always go back in and correct any errors if needed. I mean, for the most part, people won't need to do that. Sometimes they'll need to go back in and add an extra college onto their list. It also is going to show you an expected family contribution, which is always referred to as the EFC. The EFC is basically what you are expected to contribute to your child's education based on your income. So we look at our cost of attendance minus your expected family contribution, and that's going to equal your financial need. And then the school's financial aid departments, that's what they're going to use in order to actually process your FAFSA application and assign you aid. So like I said, everything is going to be processed by the university or by the college, so you can always contact the financial aid office at your university or college in order to discuss disbursement with them or any questions that you may have. Obviously, with COVID, we've had some special situations where some people have lost their jobs and such, so the 2019 taxes may not really reflect what you're currently going through with income. So you can always contact the financial aid department at the universities and ask them if there's a way to update your need to show a more accurate representation of what your family has right now. You also can contact the institution to see if there's any other types of applications or awards available. And remember, student loans, sometimes we have to take them. We want to use subsidized if we have to take them over the unsubsidized. And of course, if we can fund our schooling through Bright Futures or other scholarships, that's always going to be our best option. Though I can provide general help on the FAFSA, I'm not going to be able to answer really detailed and specific questions. So I did want to show you a few areas where you can receive help. You can always call them. I've called them several times, and they're great to walk you through different things or answer questions about specific circumstances and situations. You can email them as well. Also, if you go to FAFSA.gov, there's a live chat option. If you just have a quick question, that's a great option to use. And if you go to the Federal Student Aid page on YouTube, they have some really great videos, very informational videos to help you with your process. Thank you so much for joining us for our scholarship and financial aid presentation. Please feel free to stay in touch or reach out with any questions or concerns about any of the material that was covered tonight. You can reach me at 813-794-8717 or at kfaysash@pasco.k12.fl.us. If you are not already on my College and Career Remind, I've included the codes below. I definitely would suggest joining that in order to stay up to date on all things college and career for your grade level. Thanks so much and have a great night.